Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this week's featured photographer of the week. I am with Alisa Stilwell. She is based on the East Coast, and we're going to learn a little bit about her business. A little background on me. My name is Dustin Lucas. I am the co-owner of Evolve. My wife and I purchased Evolve a little over 2 years ago from Sal Sincata. He was the previous owner, and I've worked for Sal Sincata for over a decade. So a lot of information about weddings and studios, but we're here today. We're going to learn about Alisa Stilwell's studio and kick things off for her. Alisa, tell us a little bit about your studio and what you got going on.
Thank you. Yes, I have a portrait studio in the Hudson Valley here in New York, about an hour north of New York City. We focus on weddings and portraits. So we do photography for weddings. We do obviously portraits here in the studio, and my business partner is in fact my brother, who does all the videography. So that's all the films, and that's where that comes from. So we primarily do weddings. We're slowly creeping up over a matter of years, trying to grow the portrait side of things, which luckily we're pretty even now. So we've got an equal mix of both. So I do all the portraits here in the studio, and that focuses on maternity, newborns, headshots, and that's all in addition to weddings, which of course is extremely different. Two completely different animals. Even though it's all portraits and all photography, it's still completely different. So definitely keeps me on my toes.
Absolutely. So family business, hour north of New York City. Is that where you guys are from naturally, or is that kind of where you've landed as a business?
No, we're from here. We're from this area. So we both stayed here. I started the business back in 2011 when I still had a corporate job. So still here. And then my partner joined me in 2014. So my corporate job ended, which I knew was going to happen, and it just made complete sense to stay put. So a couple years though to get us. We're happy here in the space here. Big enough? No, never big.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, so talk to me a little bit about that journey of getting started in 2011. I'm assuming you didn't have a brick and mortar studio, maybe working out of your house or out of the basement or a shared space?
It was actually, starting in weddings, we actually, in a roundabout way, took the torch from our parents. Parents actually were, in early days of wedding videography, they had a business, in the area, and they did weddings. And, in a roundabout way, though, we never stood out and said, we're going to, be a family business in that way. It just kind of naturally evolved. And me, with my love for photography, that was a natural progression for me. So I really loved it. I was geared for it. I second shot with my parents in the industry. So I knew what weddings were about. And I really just felt like that was a natural progression. But for weddings, you don't need an actual physical space. So
sure. It's all on location.
Yeah. And so I would meet people, in the early days, I'd meet them in Starbucks and Dunkin' and that kind of thing.
For your consultations and with laptop and talk about their day. And absolutely.
Exactly. Pull out my album samples and do all that fun stuff.
Put up your easel and go, here, we have a presentation over here. And with your pointer and going, that's going to be you pretty soon. Yeah. That's good.
And then then I was able to graduate into a small office space, which was really a blessing, because then that gave a little bit of a, in my own mind, if nothing else, a feeling of being a legitimate business.
Well, sure. You feel like a professional. You have a place to go to work versus going into other kind of shared coffee shop workspaces. And when your clients show up too, that's pretty different. I mean, I don't want to say it's easy to go buy a camera and have a sole proprietorship business, but it really is, here's money. I did some pictures, but to have that space and to have a little more risk, now you have rent and you have it's a little more like, okay, I got to make $2,000 a month and I'll be able to make So 75% of that's going to rent. I'm going to make $500 a month. I'm getting, there's like, oh my God, I'm only getting paid $500 a month. And then you got to have all the other insurance, all that good stuff. So keep going. No, I love that. So, okay.
Yeah. And then it kind of progressed from there, because then I realized I really wanted to just delve into the portrait side of things, even though it was taking more into the fold. I was welcoming it. So, then I moved into left a little office space, and then kind of grew into like a little studio that became so little. I bought, a 10-foot roll of seamless paper, and I couldn't even really fit it in the room. So that's how I knew I had, I was ready for the next step.
You've got your lights like up into the drop ceiling. You've taken the drop ceiling panels out, and you've got they're pushed up into there, and all that.
Not even. It was a small historic building in one of the villages nearby, and I loved it there. I loved the neighborhood. I loved the people there, but I couldn't even, lift the light stand, and I'm kind of short, so I couldn't even get it up over 6 feet, which was kind of, that's no good. So,
sure. Everyone get down on your knees. We're going to take some family photos. And it's like, why is everyone always sitting?
Well, we're just going to sit for these. We're never going to stand it.
Exactly.
Once we moved into the space, then we were able to really, it's closer to having wedding clients come in, and after the weddings, they can come in and get their albums, and they can, it becomes a full service studio that I'd always wanted. And, prior to weddings, they come in and they sit with us, and they meet, and they bring in mom and dad, and we all talk, and they can see stuff. And it took away, that barrier, when people, because it's such a personal job, the wedding photographer, portrait photographer, it really needs that legitimate connection, needs to be able to sit in the space with someone, because you're working with them for a really long time, doing really important things. And if you don't have a connection, you can't really accomplish what you need to, in my opinion. So that's why having that personal space and being and talking with them and shaking their hands and giving them a hug if I want to, it's one of those things that really, it makes the difference, because it establishes that relationship. So I love it. I love having the space and being able to, do all aspects of the business here. Great.
Well, I think you've nailed that entire, experience there. There's this intimacy, there's this, hey, I care about you, and I want to do a good job, and this is an important day in your life, and here's some options. I mean, they're there for services, but your goal is through that they're feeling comfortable, they're feeling good about this decision. It ends up turning into they feel good about spending money with you, and they're not really concerned about how much. That's their job and their budget. But if you do a good enough job, it's very easy for them to, well, I can't say no to that. I can't say no to that. I mean, it makes it very simple. And your goal at the end is to not just show up and take pictures at a wedding. It's to put an album in their hands. It's to put wall art in their home, in their first home. And maybe they come back a year later, when they have a budget and they have time, you've cultivated that relationship. Your ideal client, of course, you'd love to have, July 1st wedding. It sounds hot as hell. But July 1st wedding, deposits, they're paying for all that. And then by July 30th, they're ordering products. They're getting their album sold. You've got money in the bank, within 45 days, you've got that $8,000, that $10,000 wedding, and all that money's in the bank. Or maybe they're doing a payment plan. Doesn't matter what path that looks like, but you've captured and you've done that from you're not in the Starbucks coffee shop anymore. You're in your studio. And it's kind of started from there. You put the time in, but that's how you're getting those customers, which, brings me up to that next question. When did you go from shooting weddings, and maybe backing it up a little bit, did in-person sales come from your parents and like, hey, you need to sell products are the only way to do it? Maybe that's a generational thing. Talk to me a little bit about that. You getting started, what you had seen working for parents and their business, and then taking it on for yourself.
Yeah, they were never, they started their business as I did, later in life. So they were never really truly comfortable with like a sales hat, wearing a sales hat. Like that was back in the day. I'm talking, for them in the 90s when they would have to cold call. They'd do a bridal show and they'd get the list and they'd have to cold call the brides and ask them. And most brides didn't even factor in videography or cinematic film. Didn't even exist, but they didn't factor it in. And it was a nice to have, but didn't always make it into the budget, which gladly we don't see nowadays. I mean, most people, when they reach out to us anyway, they're getting, we don't require them to get both, but most of the time when they reach out to us, they know that's what they want is both.
Sure.
But I have a background in sales. My corporate job was sales. My brother, my business partner, his job prior to this was sales.
Okay.
We both have that background. However, I think it's changed quite a bit over the years. Of course it does. It morphs to the clientele that you're talking with. I mean, when you're talking with somebody who, in this case, is 25 years old or 30 years old and they're getting married, there's a different aspect to how they look at what they want for their home. Some can't afford a home yet. Some of them are just starting out. And some of them have really never thought that far ahead. So
we're just going to get married and live in the car. It's like, okay, so you need a place to live. Can't live in your parents' basement forever. That's a starter home. But, anyways, yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that they really don't think of it, and they, I'll ask them during the wedding consultation, not in a salesy way, so to speak, but, trying to get a feel for what they want to do with these things afterwards. And I try to explain thinking long-term, when you're getting digital files today, great. You have a hard drive of digital files from your wedding. Great. Well, but what does that mean? Are those digital files going to even be viewable 40 years from now?
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody huddles around a thumb drive at Christmas and go, can't wait to plug that into the TV and watch the DVD slideshow. You know what I mean? It's like, There's just nothing. I'm like, my mom has one of those frames and it's cute, right? You know what I'm talking about? A nice digital frame. Oh, and it's a 9-incher, Alisa. It's a big frame. It's right next to the 60-inch TV on the wall. And what we can do is we can use this app and we can upload photos to it. But it's like, that's a mom thing, which is like, there's very much like, I'm sure for you, for sales, for parents, but for these kids, like, they're going to post these on Facebook and then Facebook's going to remind them, hey, remember when you got married last year? And they're like, holy shit, my anniversary is coming up. For you, in those, you can have those conversations with them and say, and then maybe in your marketing campaign, right now you can start going, hey, I can automate some of this. They're in my pipeline for their wedding. Their wedding is March 1st. Guess what I'm doing? Hey, anniversary's coming up, but guess what? Before that, hey, Christmas is coming up, right? You have all these holidays, Valentine's Day is coming up. Hey, birthday, like if you have the birthday, I mean, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, whether you've photographed the customer or not, these wedding clients, you need to be in their inbox educating them. And when they're like, you know what, we were just at IKEA the other day and we almost bought like crappy photographs of New York skyline. But they're like, we're in New York, it's like, and it's like, it's just so convenient because they're readily available and they want to do it. And then you're in their inbox every day. And that's the reminder of going, crap, we've never printed our photos. They need to be on our walls.
Right.
That's why if you just go, they'll come back to me in a year. I'm always here. Will they though? Are they going to go to a Walgreens, a Costco and print those photos and then go use the IKEA frame? You want to make sure that you're making them aware that this is what you do. Maybe budget isn't now. Here's what makes sense. So I'm assuming part of your sales process, and I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but that's a little bit of your sale. You have to augment your sales to where they're at in their life, not just financially, but where their mentality is for what after the wedding are you doing with these pictures, in the video.
A long time, and we can't really, if you think back, I don't know, I can definitely remember back, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And there wasn't even, 40 years ago, there was no internet. There was no, computers were just. The
wedding album was it, with like 40 to 50 prints and it was 6x6, it was 120 film, square photos and it was get together, flash, it was the whole thing, and everyone was like,
Yeah. And I'm like, you got to think long term. And if you have, a little thumb drive of your wedding pictures, what if you lose the thumb drive? What if,
Right.
20 years from now, you want to go look at that? What if you want to, hand that down to your children or show your grandchildren?
That media is obsolete. Yeah, you can't do anything with the USB-B thumb drive. Well, USB-C, right? Hey, for anybody that wants to upgrade their technology, you got these right? Maybe that'd be a silly way to get, hey, want a new thumb drive with today's, interface? Like that's kind of silly. Or, hey, you can download your galleries forever from me because I'll just keep paying for them forever. Like at a certain point, here are your services. You're purchasing assets from me, digital assets. Forewarning, nobody does anything with digital assets. The prints, right? The album, those are the heirloom products that you're going to cherish, right? And you're going to want to have. And I think the reality is you want to have the digitals somewhere. You want to have these online. God forbid your house burns down and your album was in it and all that kind of stuff. You're out of business. What do they do, right? They'd want to have, all those questions that people don't give a shit about that until you see LA fires and they're like, people are losing their homes. And you start thinking about like, well, I have it in my safe, but your safe isn't like waterproof, right? It's like fireproof, but not waterproof. All those little things, like it's important. Those important memories, whether somebody does a family shoot with you in the studio one time, or, a wedding, God forbid, you don't want to lose those files.
No. And the thing about it too, is that, we're lucky enough to be sort of, my goal is to be the photographer for the family. So, I shoot their wedding, I shoot their engagement session, I shoot their wedding, anniversary comes and goes, whatever. But then I look, I open up Instagram and I see their baby announcement, so then I can know that, they're ready for maternity pictures, and then maternity pictures turn into newborn pictures, and then turn first birthday cake smash pictures, and then full family pictures. And I'm in for all of it, because the people that I work with, because I made that connection,
of course,
early on, and I made that, relationship be something that's important. And I have families that come back to me, for, each stage, and then they're looking at me for Christmas minis, and they're looking at me for, their
say no to minis. Always say no to minis. No minis. There's no money in minis.
I know.
Yeah, it's how that'd be the first thing he'd say. He goes, yeah, that's cute and all, but you're like, you got rent. Is rent cute? Rent's not cute. It's a bill. No. But no, I think through cultivating relationships, having the space and being a professional business, running IPS and beyond just like, pre-qualifying them for products or being your customer, you're just really getting a sense of you want to have them as a customer in the long term. You want to give them that experience. Well, why would they want to go anywhere else? And you want to offer them options, not be too pushy, but you need to look through a perspective of everyone's not going to come in with the same thing of like, photos should be the most important thing in your life, right? Your goal is to educate them to make them understand, oh, geez, okay, this is what we would do with it. That's your job. But I think that, through your business in it, navigating and weddings, and, we were talking a little bit earlier before we went on air, and you're looking to go after more portrait work. And, to kind of, before we wrap things up, talk to me a little bit about the journey you're on right now, some of that pivoting you've done, whether the wedding industry has, been helping or hurting your business, or it's just changed. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Where are you shifting things like for 2025 and into 2026? Talk to us a little bit about that.
We're heavily focusing on portraits because I actually I love the connection aspect to portraits. So it's such a completely different process. It's a completely different sales cycle. It's a completely different, it's hard to combine. It's hard to ride two horses at once. It's hard to be a mom to two different families at once. So that's what I feel like it is. And each day it's a welcome challenge, because I'm grateful to get to be able to do this. It's the best, but I want to be able to not lose, the relationships I have with my wedding clients. And I want to also bring in, new folks to come in for portraits and stuff, but to do both, it's very difficult sometimes because, there's so many facets to what the day looks like. Just in a normal, as a small business owner, we all know, anybody who's ever had a small business, they know that you're wearing all the hats. You're going to the accountant to do the taxes, and you're
100%.
trying to fix your web page, and you're trying to edit your pictures, and you got to send that album design out, and you have to order the prints and follow up. And I'm overwhelming myself just hearing myself. But take that and multiply that times 2, meaning your wedding side and your portrait side.
Sure.
They are different, and then add in their films, which adds in a third side of it, for the video stuff. But once you factor in all that, it's very difficult to make sure that you're hitting the mark on all your things. So we're looking to automate a little bit more. We're looking to outsource more.
Of course.
We're outsourcing a lot of our marketing. We love, I think I would be out of business, quite honestly, if it wasn't for the outsourcing that we currently do. The editing, color correction, album design, thanks to you and your companies. I've been with Evolve for, I want to say 10 years. And I'm sure I would be out of business.
We haven't got rid of you. We've just stuck around, a long time.
It's amazing. And I rely on that because that frees me up. And I know that being a tried and true testament to when you learn to let go of all the things that you can't control, it frees you up to actually do the things that you need to do to grow the business. So we're in that mindset of, we don't have to, even though it's just the two of us, we've not been successful with hiring admins and things like that. We've
really
not had the best of luck with that. But in knowing that, we have to know that we also can't do it all. So this has been our year to try to focus on, let's look out and see who's out there that are experts in the field that we need to pull into our fold in whatever way that we can to help us do a better job and help us not lose grip on, who's coming up on a wedding or who's coming up for a portrait session or
100%.
who needs us. We really need to start thinking in a larger sense, not as a mom and pop. We don't have to do everything ourselves. But at the same time, we don't have to necessarily hire in-house to do that anymore either, because there's so many people out there that are experts that can help us accomplish what we need to in these things that just social media alone, just marketing alone, just, any facet to what we do. If we can learn to give that over to what would be helpful, then that's going to help us, and that's going to help us. So we've got a ways to go. I'm one of those kind of people that I'm never satisfied with where I am. I'm always trying to learn, always trying to figure out what's next, what can I learn more, what can I practice, what can I incorporate, how can I make the client experience better, fuller, how can I, make a difference. And if I'm, nose to the screen all day, I can't be out there really learning what people need and meeting that need whenever it's possible.
Well, I mean, you're co-CEO or, co-owner, whatever you want to call that, co-president. I mean, if you're on the ground floor and you're, at that view all the time, I mean, you have no ability to see, oh, there's a problem over here, or gosh, this is getting neglected, or geez, we're just burning through cash over here. March is going to be really tough to make payroll, to pay myself. You're not sitting above and looking at all the systems and, kind of removing yourself. Right. However, it's very important to understand you've been on the floor, you've done every one of those jobs. And, I think that journey of building the team in-house, you're like, man, that would be great. Let's build some buy-in with employees. Maybe they want to eventually buy into the business. And, it becomes this like, that sounds great. I'd love to have a right-hand person that just like, I can share things about the business and trust that they're not going to go, oh, we had a really good month. I'd really like that raise. It's like, you do deserve a raise, but I can't share these financial because you don't really understand the big picture. You know what I mean? Like in the cost of things. And then you go down that route and they're like, well, you don't have to be a jerk about it. But is you've going through all of those things and now going, We don't want to stop growing. You can't sit still as a business owner. Your business will sit still and die if you do. And it's not just about what technology is out there, what the market's doing, but it's truly looking at consumer behavior, looking at what people are actually buying and what trends are out there. Like, people don't like framed prints in their house anymore. Nobody likes the acrylic thing and the metals that's dead. Nobody wants that stuff. What's new? Nobody can afford a true oil painting. But I know that, like, with a lot of portrait studios, there's still that kind of like, how do I give this kind of fine art, really high end, singular image? Like, they're coming in for one image, and it's something they're probably going to swap out annually as their kids grow. How do they come to me? I need to get hand painted backdrops. I need to have like the lighting dialed in. They need to have some options to go through, maybe 30 to 40 to 50 pictures that we took, 3 to 4 scenes, a few different outfits, but they're coming in for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then they're going volume. I want 10 to 20 a week. I want to be doing 10 to 20 sales sessions a week, right? I think when we started talking earlier, and you're talking more going to portraits, whether it's weddings are down, I'm tired of chasing them, or there's more money to be made in portraits. It's another revenue stream. And when you have options to go, I want to ramp this revenue stream up versus hoping that this one only over here is going well. I mean, I think that's such a mature way to diversify your business. And then it doesn't have that wedding crash, or nobody wants portraits anymore. Now you're fighting against like, there's not even like volume portrait studios have all died off. Right. Like massively, like they're not even in shopping. They're not even in like shopping malls. They're not in square. Like what happened? I mean, and then you have so many people for $300, hug the tree. I'll do your senior photos. Those people aren't even in your markets, and they won't ever stop. And for weddings and all that kind of stuff. And I think that having the studio, being established for a while, I think those two things make somebody go, hey, we need some portraits. We have no idea what that cost is going to be. You show them options going, okay, well, we spent $1,500. That's great. We loved everything we got. They could have went and spent $300 and stood in the park with their squinty eyed and, somebody pointing them in the wrong direction, and there's birds pooping on them in the open shade, that they're using. And they just didn't know any better. But you're going to scoop them up, and then they're going to come back, and they're going to go back and come back. And that's that consistency with your business. And I love hearing that, like, you've worked, you've probably been working with the same labs for a while as well. Like,
absolutely.
So like, something for me that's always comes up in these kind of conversations is, and something that Sal's always rang true. It's that consistency. Like, you're shooting with this brand camera, you're working with this lab. Like, why are you messing around? It's not like you're like going, hey, Canon or Sony or Nikon, I'm over here. Hey, so-and-so lab, like, hook me up a deal. You use them because you depend on them. And it's the service on the back end. They have bad service, you're going to go somewhere else. But when you cultivate that relationship, it does come with, there becomes a little more loyalty, and you get a little more access to service, because that happens with any company you use, right? Somebody goes, wow, geez, this person spent $50,000 on Samsung TVs, right? You're not really going to ever really have an amazing relationship with Samsung, but with a lab, right? And they're going to say they see how much you spend, and it's how much time. They're going to give a little more back, to you in that.
And they take care of your
customers. It's
great. It's a wonderful feeling to know that if you make a mistake, if I made a mistake on an order, I can just call them up and say, hey, you know what, hold up. And, oh yeah, absolutely. Or if, any company that I work with, I always try to find the best, and the best doesn't always mean the most popular. It doesn't always mean the most expensive necessarily, but you do get what you pay for. And, I'm so loyal that, once I pick a horse and ride it, I'm there, because I have to rely upon what I'm saying to a client is that, yes, you're definitely going to get you're going to get your album in a week. You're going to get your print, it's going to be perfect, and and I have to rely on that, because that by extension is a reflection on me. So it always has to be consistent.
100%. You're the one that has to answer to the clients. We just, we're just working together, and we're in the back of the shop, working all the things. But thank you so much for connecting with me and taking the time to talk a little bit about your business. I mean, what's really cool about this is I learned more about your business. Us talking for 30 minutes. We've been working together for 10 years, and it's not a bad thing to not be talking to somebody all the time. Usually in our space, if you're emailing and talking to somebody all the time, there's usually problems, and things going on. We're busy, we're doing our different things, but this is a really good space for us to kind of learn a little bit more about your business and highlight some of your success and how you've navigated being in the business for so long. And thank you so much for your time. And everyone, tune in next week for our featured photographer of the week, and we will keep things going. Thank you so much.
Thank you.